Well, good morning. Welcome to Wednesday morning's thought for today. This week we've been looking at the story of how Herod had John the Baptist killed because he made a rash promise in the heat of a moment that he should never have made. We're looking at the topic of sin, and we're dealing a lot with sin this week. Because there is sin in each of our lives that needs to be dealt with. We can't put our head in the sand like the ostrich is meant to do and pretend it's not there. We can't somehow say, oh, well, you know what, someday I'll get round to it. This issue of sin is something which is important because it's important to each one of us. And sin is what keeps us away from the Lord Jesus Christ. Sin is what forms a barrier between him and us. And so it's vitally important that we, wanting to get to know Jesus better, deal with the sin. And we can't deal with it in ourselves, but we need to recognize it and then bring it to him and ask him for forgiveness. Okay, we're not pretending in any way that any one of us is free from sin, because we know it's something that Adam and Eve brought into the world, and it's been with everyone. Even the best person we've ever known has had sin in their lives, because we know that no one was ever sinless apart from Jesus himself. And so I'm talking about something which affects all of us. Let's not pretend it doesn't affect all of us. It affects every single one of us, you and me, and we each need to allow Jesus to deal with it. We thought yesterday about the whole issue of the cost of sin, or the price of sin, and how sin will, as I said, clear you out. Sin will take everything you have. Sin will take all that you've built up, everything that you think is precious, and Satan will take it from you through the action of sin. Because let's not pretend that we don't know who's behind all this. Satan is behind this. Satan knows your weak points. Satan knows your triggers. Satan knows what is costly to you. Satan knows where you place value in this life. And because he knows, he will go after those areas. And so we need to be sure that we know who we're dealing with. It's not sin itself. Sin is not some sort of abstract force. Sin is the result of allowing temptation into our lives, because we allow ourselves to give in to temptation. So we're looking yesterday at the cost or the price of sin. But there's also an aspect of sin which is very subtle, and it pops up really in this reading that we read yesterday and today. The reading this morning really is where Herod has vowed to Herodias' daughter that he will give her up to half his kingdom. Now, that wasn't his to give, but he's basically saying, this is how much I will give you. Ask me for whatever you want. And that's a big boast to make in front of all these men who are listening to him. And they must have thought, wow, what a man Herod is to do that. And she then hears this, and what happens is very interesting, because this daughter, then we read in verse 24, and she went out and said to her mother, what should I ask? And she said, the head of John the Baptist. Incredibly chilling when you read that account. The mother knew what she was after. She knew if she would get Herod in the right time, in the right place, she could go in for the kill. She could get the thing that she knew he didn't want to give up on, but also the thing that was spoiling this marriage, spoiling this relationship, spoiling her chance to be somebody important. John the Baptist was speaking against this relationship, and yet she knew that the only way this would ever be silenced is if John the Baptist was silenced. And so the daughter, not knowing quite what to do, or maybe the mother said to her, whatever Herod says to you, don't say anything to him, but come back to me and I'll tell you what to say. I'm certain that there was something going on in the background here, that Herodias knew what she was up to. The daughter didn't ask for the obvious. The daughter could have said, oh, okay, thank you. I'll take half your kingdom then. That would have been an obvious answer. Wow, thank you. There could have been a bargain. She could say, well, I'll take just over half or whatever, or I'll take it in the form of jewels, or I'll take it in the form of gold. She could have just asked for the obvious, because the obvious was, I'll give you up to half my kingdom. Wow. But she didn't do anything about it. She decided that she would go back to her mother, most likely because her mother had primed her to come back afterwards. And the thing about sin is, sin will not necessarily ask for the obvious. Sin will ask for something that doesn't seem terribly bad, doesn't seem very obvious, doesn't seem to be a threat in any way. And so we give in to sin because we think, well, it's just a little white lie, or well, it's not going to cost me that much, or nobody's going to know about it. It's not going to hurt anybody. Nobody's getting harmed if I do this. Because that's the way sin gets in. It asks for something that doesn't seem to be the obvious. And then we realize later that all it was simply opening the door to something far more obvious, something far more brutal, something far more serious, something far more devastating. And so be careful with sin. Be careful with the temptations that come your way. Be careful saying to yourself, well, it's not going to matter. It's only asking for this. It'll only do this. It'll only do that. It's not going to hurt anybody. It will ask for something that doesn't seem very serious, but it will come in and it will show you its true self once you've let it in. Be careful with sin. We are all guilty of it, but Jesus can forgive us. Jesus can give us a way out in the middle of temptation. We thought about that on Sunday as well. Herod got himself in a real mess. He gave the opportunity for her to ask for anything she wanted, but what she came back giving the answer to him, John the Baptist's head, was a price that devastated him, deeply, deeply troubled him. And sin will do that. Deal with sin by coming to Christ, admitting it to him and asking for his forgiveness, but also his help to stand against that sin. We need to do that because each one of us has sin in our lives. But thanks be to God that he's prepared to deal with it. God bless.